I want to share with you at least 15 ways that you can make a living if you move to the country, you live in a rural area. How can you make it out there? Hey everybody, Chad Cruiser here with Health and Homestead. If you end up liking this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications, the like button. Now, let's start with the very first one. If you move to the country, obviously making a living is more difficult in the sense that there's just not as many jobs. I mean, you have thousands of jobs in the cities, and sometimes you'll have in a small town, you'll have factories and things like that, but aside from that, that's an option if you live in an area where there's some kind of industry, you can go for that, but that's not mainly what we're talking about. The first thing I want to talk about is you could do an apprenticeship. Now that could be in various fields. You could do apprentice work in construction, and we'll get back to construction in a moment for another topic, but you could also do it as an electrician. You could do it as various different things. I'll give you an example. One I'll bet you've never even thought about is you could apprentice. I met a guy, I was living in a motorhome, traveling full-time for years, and we had a situation where our hydraulic jacks got stuck down and they just weren't working, so we couldn't move. And so we had to contact somebody to come to us, because I guess you could be towed, but in this situation, there was a mobile RV guy, and he had all of the things he needed right with him. I mean, obviously, if he had to get some parts, you got to go get them somewhere. But in general, he had all of his tools with him, and he shared with me. I mean, the guy made a good living doing what he was doing, and he was in an area where there was a lot of RVs, but he was looking for an apprentice, but he said, nobody will work these days. You just can't find a young person who wants to take over a job. Now, I know that's not true. I know there's some of you right now who are like, hey, man, if I could do that, I would do it. And so the point is, I know if you're willing to work, you can find a job almost anywhere. And if you're going to move to the country, you need to be someone who is willing to work and willing to work hard. And if you do that, you'll find a job anywhere. But so this guy doing a successful work, struggling to find an apprentice. So if you're willing to be a worker, and by the way, a lot of the standard business jobs are going the way of the dinosaur, meaning a lot of the MBAs and things. I mean, as tons of businesses shut down, in difficult times, you may not have those kind of jobs. So having a practical skill can be very, very important. Another job that I'll just put in with this one, this isn't really apprentice work, but I saw a guy doing an incredible job. So the same thing with the motorhome situation. This guy would do detailing on motorhomes. He would walk around the outside of the motorhome, he would clean it up, he would use, different, solvents or whatever he was doing. So just by hand, he would clean these motorhomes. It would take him like 4 hours, or just RVs in general, 4 hours per RV, and he would charge $400. I'm guessing it probably cost him $10 to $20 maximum for the amount of tools he put into it each time. Now, the tools were more than that, but I mean, the supplies that he would use up over the course, I mean, even if he used $50 worth, he was taking in $350 in 4 hours, and he was doing 2 a day. I mean, $800 a day. I mean, I'm guessing he didn't spend $50 on all of that he did. So the guy was making $750 a day by cleaning the outside of motorhomes in a place where people just have them parked. So I'm not saying you have to do that. The point is, there's so many jobs out there where you can make a great living. Now, that's an insane living it was work, because he was working on the outside of those motorhomes and, breathing and all that stuff all the time. To me, that's kind of a negative or whatever. But the point is, he was making a fantastic income. So the first one, I'm really just talking about apprenticeship. You don't even need to apprentice on that one. You can just go and learn to do that kind of thing. You could start off and say, hey, I'll do it for $150 and work your way up to $400, and people would probably pay it, because there's these whole parks filled with motorhomes that just sit there, and they probably like them clean because they get the moss and all that junk. But I'm going on way too long. Apprenticeships are certain things you could find, or you can make up your own work. Another one I mentioned, this is really number 2, even though I already talked about like 2 or 3 already, is carpentry. Carpentry is a great work almost anywhere. And there are times where you have boom seasons, and we're in one of those ones right now where carpenters just can't keep up. There's just too much work to do. But even in difficult times where houses aren't being built, typically somebody still wants things redone, or they want a shed built, or they want you to redo a portion of their house or their kitchen, whatever it is. Carpentry can be a great work to get into. And you can make in those situations, I mean, these aren't the only prices, but you're probably starting off in the upper teens all the way up to $25 to $30 or more an hour as a carpenter. So that's a fantastic option. Another thing you could do is actually either an eBay or an Etsy business. Now, selling things on eBay is an option. Another option is Etsy. Etsy is more like a kind of a trendy craft type site with not just crafts, but all kinds of things that people make. A cousin of mine, his wife, she stays at home with the kids. They have like 5 daughters, and she stayed at home during coronavirus and was making masks, and people were buying masks from her. And so there's so many options when it comes, and you may think like, well, I'm not really that practical. I don't know how to make things. The great thing is for you, there is this thing that can teach you how to do like anything you want to know. It's called YouTube, right? So you can learn how to do almost anything, and you could learn how to make some crafty type thing. I mean, there's seed businesses on there, kind of homespun seed businesses, all kinds of things. So you could start something. We got another, my wife's cousin, he goes around to places like Goodwill and rummages through the racks when they first come in, and he buys shirts from like the 1980s. And you're thinking, so? And he can sell them for insane amounts of money because people are like looking for these old shirts from the 80s or whatever. And the point is, there's literally no end of things you can do to make a living. And so that's a particular option. There's probably not as many of those places in the country, but you can even take trips from time to time to town. And so there's all kinds of things you can do to start an Etsy or a eBay business. Now, something that goes kind of along with that, but a little different, is having a website. A friend of ours, husband and wife that we know, they have a daughter who has a vegan website for recipes. And so she slowly worked it up, putting out recipes, and she was making like $1,500 a month. And think about it, if you're a stay-at-home mom, an extra $1,500 a month is a nice amount of money. I mean, it may not be enough to take care of a whole family in general in certain situations, but hey, that could be a great addition to the family. And from what I understand, then she got busy with kids or whatever and stopped doing it, but the website stayed up. And I think like a year later, she was still making like $1,500 a month. I mean, that's phenomenal for, it's a good bit of work. And I don't want you to think that you start a website and you'll start making $1,500 a month just putting up recipes in the beginning. It takes time to gather people to where they start liking your site and going to your site and either buying things from you or just from the advertisements that are on the site. Those are options, and it's worked for her and it may work for you. Do something that you enjoy. If you're going to pick something, don't pick a random thing that you don't enjoy, or else it's just going to be a burden. If you're going to really get something like that to work, it's a labor of love in the beginning. You probably won't make almost anything, and in time it starts to take off. So pick something you love. Now, this next one isn't for most of us that aren't doctors or nurses, but if you're in that field, that's a great option for country living, because they will actually often, for small towns, small cities, or country living areas, they will pay doctors more sometimes to live out there if you're a part of some large system of medical professionals, because people don't want to go out there often. And so you could actually live this awesome life with your family with all kinds of freedom and make actually more money because of it out in the country in an area that has a lower standard of living, so it doesn't cost as much to live there. So you get everything you want, you get a more fulfilling life, you get to live in the country. I mean, nurses that live in the country might be making 70 grand a year, which is a nice income. So that's another option, doing the medical work in the country. I mean, my wife's cousin, he went from Southern California where, they make quite a bit of money, but he went to a kind of like a small city in Illinois that, people just don't want to go to, and he made way more money than he would make in Southern California. They gave him a place to live, they gave him a car, all of these things that he could do, and it was cheaper. And so if you're the kind of person, you could live, depending on how far you're willing to commute, half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, it's up to you. You can still live out in the country and do something like that. Another option along with medical is to do something like a paramedic. I have a friend, we lived in South Dakota, the Black Hills of South Dakota, one of the most beautiful places in the world. I love it there. I'd love to live there right now, but I don't. Nevertheless, one of my friends there, he worked at the Pine Ridge Reservation, and he would do paramedic work. And so you can make like $35,000, $45,000 in the country doing something like that. And in the country, you're probably not going to see as many patients, I'm not sure what you call calls a day, but still you have a great job, and being a paramedic could be very fulfilling, helping people out in the community. Another one is being a farmer or a market gardener. Obviously that one's kind of obvious, but farmers, let me break it down. Being a market gardener is a great way to make a living with a little bit of money, being a farmer is a great way to, well, not always make a good living. Actually, it's not always a good living. I'll tell you why. It can be. But so the average farm in the United States today, according to the government statistics, is 444 acres, and the average income on a farm is negative $1,400 or $1,500. Somebody's got to be making money, but on average, it's not so great. Many small farms, what they do is they grow things and they have a side business where they work full time, but then they work on the farm some of the time. And with all the expenses, they're actually in the hole. You say, why would they do it? I mean, number one, they find it fulfilling. Number two, they can sell it at the end of their life and they'll still be a multimillionaire because of the land that they have. So that's an option. But for most of us who can't buy all that land, you can literally market gardeners, market farmers, where these guys, they end up having maybe an acre and a half of land. They grow all kinds of food, various things, greens and veggies that they sell at a farmer's market or sell at the local kind of high, or maybe they even drive to a city an hour away and they sell at high-end restaurants. These guys can be making $100,000 per acre. And one guy's making like 300 plus thousand on like an acre and a half. And so it is incredible how much you can make at that. Most people aren't going to make that much, but I have a friend who, or acquaintance, I would rather call him. I don't know him well, but he just shared when we were at a conference a few months ago that he makes roughly $100,000, grosses $100,000 per acre. And I think he nets 50, 60 grand per acre, which is, so it just shows that even on a small piece of property, most people, if they work hard enough in life, at least in the United States, could get themselves just a few acres. It's not that hard moving out into the country and getting that amount of land. It may take some work for sure, but you can make a decent income even on a small property. And I'll do a whole video on that in the future, telling you about farmers who are doing this, how they're making a living like that, but that'll be a future video. Another opportunity is being a wildland forest firefighter, where you go out and these guys can actually, it's seasonal work often, and you can make $50,000+ a year doing seasonal work, fighting forest fires or doing that kind of labor. And so this is hard work, obviously. I'm sure at the end of the day, every day you come home feeling like a man, right? Being out there in the elements like that. But it can be technical work, it can be dangerous work, but quite fulfilling. Seeing the labor of your hands each day, and just a great opportunity. So that's something to also consider if you're fit and healthy enough. That's really going to be only for people who are relatively healthy. Another option that's kind of similar to that is going into logging. You can make anywhere from like $36,000 to $58,000, somewhere in there is kind of the average range that people make doing logging. So once again, tough work, decent income, and just a respectable job. Another option that could be kind of similar along those lines is having cordwood for sale or firewood for sale. And you can have one of those simple things like on the end of your property if you're on a busy road or a camping area where, $5 bundles, $10 bundles for campers driving by. That's an option. You can also sell them to stores in the area where you actually bundle this all up yourself, and you can make a decent living off this, or even just a side job for your family if you have enough land, or if you're in a situation where you're cutting people's trees down in the area. That can be a perfect option to even your teenage sons could be doing something like that. That's totally an option also. Another thing in the country is welding. Having a job as a welder is a great opportunity. Welders, from what I understand, can make like even some of the starting welders might be making upwards of like $40 an hour. So that's a really good income. And you can do that almost anywhere. People need, welding done, especially in the country. I mean, you got farmers who have equipment that needs to be taken care of. You could be someone who travels around and does this work, or you could be somebody who works at some kind of shop doing this. The welding is a great opportunity. I got a friend out in North Dakota who owns a business and he has a welding shop. It's a fantastic way to make a living. Now you may say, Chad, okay, a lot of these things are hard work, true, but they don't all have to be. You could go into something like, you could be like an accountant, tax accountant. These guys, I got a friend who's a farmer in Minnesota or Wisconsin. You think, well, how good of a friend are you? You can't remember. Oh, you're right. But nevertheless, he's both a farmer and an accountant. And you can make like 50 to 70 grand. And you could probably take off a chunk of the summer depending on how you do it, or at least you could work enough on your farm if you're farming. And you could do it, in the spring, you're doing a lot of your work for the taxes and so forth. So that's an option to be, if your body can't necessarily handle it, or if you just love math, being an accountant is an awesome opportunity. Here's another cool one I wouldn't have thought of, but a friend of mine is doing it. Actually, a couple, the husband and the wife together, they're market gardeners, but the wife wanted to do flowers, and so she began to do flowers and to sell those both at the market where they would sell things and so forth. And if I remember correctly, that I think they're making like 50, 60 grand a year so far in the market gardening, and like within that, they're making like 10 or 12 grand a year just starting off in flowers. So that's a great addition. So you may say, well, 10 or 12, that wouldn't quite fully pay all the bills. No, but it might be a great addition, and someday it might. I mean, someday if it takes off, you might be able to fully make a living off just the flowers. But the point is, maybe there's a wife out there who would love doing that. And our friend who did it, she gave us a beautiful bouquet of flowers. She picked them out. She grows all these different flowers, and these ones I wish I knew. I don't know if they're called like zinnias or something like that. I could be totally wrong, but whatever they were, there were multiple kinds that they dried looking just like they did when they were alive. And so they were just beautiful bouquet, both fresh or dried. Really cool way of doing it. Look into that. That's an option if you're interested in that. Another opportunity is excavation, bulldozing, heavy machinery. Now, this kind of work has a serious hourly pay, like $65 to $100 an hour if you own your own equipment. The trouble is, you own your own equipment, and that stuff is not cheap. So if you own an excavator, I mean, you know, a new excavator is really expensive. A used one, I don't know, $20-some thousand or something for a, old excavator. But the point is, you make a lot per hour, but you also got to have the upkeep on this machinery. But doing this is a great work. There's almost always work to be done as an excavator. There might be times a year where you have less, but the point is, in season, you can, I mean, think about it, in an 8-hour day, if you're making $100 an hour, I mean, that's a lot of change in a very short time period. And so working with heavy machinery is a great option. There are times where it can actually be hard on the body. You know, I've done some excavation work. I've done it on our own property, had somebody helping me out. But, you know, guys who are working in some of these machines all day with a backhoe, it can be hard on their body. These machines are shaking and just kind of rough. So that's something to consider. If you already got a bad back, consider that one a little bit. But in general, it's a great work to do. Another option is being an arborist, or someone who, like the guys who climb the trees, and a tree that's hanging over a house and they cut it apart miraculously, where these things are dropping with ropes and they're not hitting the roof. Now, I was just talking with a friend today to find out, hey, so how do you charge on those kind of things? And he said, it's really, really hard to say, is what he said. He said, some trees it may be $200, and other trees going to be $2,000. It just depends on how easy it is, how dangerous it is, because these guys, and how much time you have to spend in the tree, because every moment you're in a tree, it just adds exponentially to the danger that's up there. And so there's a lot of danger, so they also need serious insurance, and that's why it costs the big bucks. And so it's technical also. And so you're probably going to want to be apprenticed. I mean, yeah, you can watch some YouTube videos, but you'd probably want to be hands-on with another guy who can really show you what you're doing. And it's dangerous, but I can imagine it's very, very fulfilling. Another factor is, do they have to take all the wood away? What do they have to do with it? So there's a bunch of factors, but once again, anywhere from $200 a tree to $2,000 or more per tree, probably depending on where you live. I mean, certain parts, if you're out west, there's some massive trees out there. Out east, there's some good-sized trees too. In some areas, they're really big ones, but most areas, they're not as big. But regardless, that's a great way to make a living. Now, if there's something that I haven't mentioned, which I'm sure there's 1,000 things I haven't mentioned, please share them below in the comments. I'd love to hear some additional things that you think would have been good to share. I could maybe share in a future video. Share it down below. If you end up liking this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications, and share with a friend. God bless and have a fantastic day.